So firstly, Ray, thank you very much for being here today, supporting the Tree in a Million campaign. It's obviously an initiative that's very close to our hearts, and I know it was for you guys as well. It was essentially a no-brainer for you to want to support this, so really appreciate that. 353 trees that we're going to plant today, so hopefully the team are fully motivated and ready to go. But whilst we had you here, I just wanted to use the opportunity to just pick your brains a little bit to find out why Enara Bio wanted to start their journey towards net zero, what your aspirations are, what was the sort of driving force really behind starting this journey in the first place?
Well, first off, thanks for having us. We're delighted to be here.
Absolute pleasure.
We're looking forward to planting the trees today. I think at Enara, the planet, wildlife, our natural resources mean a lot to us as a company. I mean, we're a company of biologists, basically. So we know a lot about biology and a lot about the planet and how it works.
Yeah.
And I think we have a strong culture whereby we value people and the environment,
Right.
because they both go hand in hand. Now for the current occupants of Earth, and in the future for our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. And I think being a company that puts research into cancer and trying to change people's lives for the better, cancer patients' lives for the better, all of that work would be in vain if we didn't try and do something to contribute to a massive global problem, which is climate change, right? So I think that's the driving factor behind us getting involved in understanding what our environmental aspects and impacts are, learning a little bit more about what we put into this great big machine and what pops out at the other end, because you don't see that. When you pour something down the sink or you turn something on and leave it on, you don't see directly in front of you what the impact is further down the line, right? So we're spending a lot of time trying to understand what we do, because we're a science lab and we have biological agents, we have dangerous chemicals, we have radiation, we've got an autoclave, we've got trade effluent, all that kind of stuff. We're trying to learn about specifically what that will do to the environment downstream and how we can minimize it as much as possible.
Yeah, brilliant.
So that's really our motivation behind getting involved.
That's a really interesting point, and an important point, because it's the driving force as to why you're doing what you're doing, and it's nice to get the opportunity to talk to you about that and to share that with everybody else as well. How have you found the process itself? So obviously capturing your data so that we can start to calculate and report on the footprint, understanding where that footprint's coming from, like breaking it down, looking at reports and things. How have you found that that process from your side, and then how's it been working with NCZ on that?
Well, this is our second year doing it, right? So this year has been far easier than the first time we did it, because it was something brand new. I think when we first started as well, I was maybe only a year at the company, so I was still getting my head around, our water meters, our electrical meters, our essential power, all that kind of stuff. So when we first started the journey, it felt at the time quite overwhelming, because there was a lot of data to collect.
Sure.
But once you put the processes in place to start the data collection, it's actually really easy.
Yeah. Well, now obviously you've got the portal as well, so accessing those categories that you need to find data for and being able to input that straight through to the platform is a huge step forward in terms of making that whole data collection aspect so much more accessible.
Yeah.
And easier to progress through. So that's great. What benefits have you had as an organisation by establishing what that footprint is and where it's coming from?
I think there's a couple of benefits. I think the first one for me is I think it's understanding what our environmental aspects and impacts are, because it's only really when you sit down and go through the process of data collection that you see everything that you need to collect.
Yeah.
So I mentioned electric and water, employee commute, purchased goods and services, and trying to figure out a carbon footprint for those, business travel, usage of fuels. So being a biotech, we obviously we use quite a lot of inert gases, which we classify as fuel, so nitrogen, helium, all that kind of stuff. We calculate how much of that we use in the year. So I think there's the first benefit for me is the education piece. We're learning about our aspects and impacts,
Yeah.
and we're putting them down on paper. That's the first step. I think the second benefit is then understanding what's within your control to change and what isn't.
Yeah.
So being on Oxford Science Park, we're not our standalone building whereby we control everything.
Yeah.
So things like our general waste contract is owned by our landlord, which is Oxford Science Park. So we don't have full control of that, but we do have control of all the energy and water we use inside the building, who we do business with, who we procure goods and services from, what business travel we do, and doing virtual meetings instead where possible, all that kind of stuff. So really understanding what you can control and taking ownership of that and changing that first is step one. And then step two is developing the confidence and capability of influencing your landlord or your board or your boss. Supply chain, is exactly it. And those things are not always within our control to change, but we can influence them. And I think that's a benefit.
Part of it, because that whole understanding what that impact is, and then inviting like suppliers, for instance, to collaborate with you on how collectively we can work towards this working better for everyone. So like order profiles, delivery profiles, what efficiencies could be found. That's going to cement and further cement that relationship, but also help you to reduce that footprint, because that is an area that you don't have control over. So by collaborating with the organisations that do have control, but knowing what difference that's going to make is half the battle. So then, by working together, you can start to influence the inaccessible part.
Absolutely. And I think then the last benefit, or certainly the third benefit that comes to mind is, hopefully, touch wood, there will come a day when Enara is seeking out their own independent building that we're in control of and can manage. And actually, technology and construction has come a long way. And knowing our environmental aspects and our impacts will help us, hopefully in the future, to build a very sustainable facility where we can engineer a lot of the bad stuff for the environment out and have a really efficient building.
Having a baseline of where you are means that you've got a clear path of where you want to go and how you need to get there, and what that difference is going to be. So it's great that that's already on the horizon. What are some of the other things that because I know you've obviously done a lot in terms of like sensor technology and improving efficiencies in the areas that you can influence, but maybe talk to us a little bit about some of those things that you've done, but also some of the plans maybe that you've got moving forward.
So the two things that come to mind are, so last year our general waste contract moved from it moved to a 100% renewable energy source. So all of our general waste is now going to a bioreactor at Ardley in Oxfordshire. So that's going to a bioreactor, which is far better for the environment than landfill. So we're a 0% to landfill organisation now, which is step number one, which hopefully will have a huge impact on our greenhouse gas emissions for this year's report.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the other huge wins for us was our electricity tariff has also moved to 100% renewable sources as well.
Brilliant.
And that's broken down, I think, between wind, solar, and hydropower.
Oh, brilliant!
So they're the three sources now. So none of our electricity comes from fossil fuels anymore either, which is amazing.
Another big step.
So they're the two big changes we made last year. Some of the other things, in general, I think we don't use a lot of water anyway, so we keep an eye on how much water we use, especially because we've got an autoclave and trade effluent. We measure to make sure we don't go outside of our trade effluent consent with Thames Water. So our water is staying low, as it always has. But in terms of our energy consumption, we have put as much lab equipment as we can on timers. So I think at 6 p.m. every evening, if someone hasn't turned off a microscope or a water bath or something like that in the lab, it's connected to a timer that will automatically power it off.
Brilliant.
Other equipment has built-in sleep mode and power down mode after a certain amount of inactivity. So those functions are activated on a lot of our lab equipment as well.
Brilliant.
And then in the office, all of our meeting room big screens are on a power down as well after 6 p.m. The lighting in the entire facility is LED, energy efficient lighting, and that's all on PIR sensors. So they turn themselves off after I think in the office it's 20 minutes of no motion, and in the lab it's after 40 minutes of no motion.
Right.
So that's powered off completely, which is actually
It's a big
producing a
difference.
saving for us.
Yeah.
I think on last year, so the first year we collected, I think we were averaging about 10,000 kilowatt hours per month. For the 2023 calendar year, we're averaging 11,000 kilowatt hours. So our consumption has gone up by 1,000 kilowatts per month. But actually, we've bought another, £1 million worth of scientific equipment since our first year.
Right.
So actually, it's gone up by 1,000, but it could have gone up by 5,000 really,
Yeah.
because we've got so much more sophisticated equipment in the
Yeah,
laboratories now.
absolutely.
So,
Well, that'd be interesting to track as well, because that level of intensity. So yes, your absolute footprint might have grown because you're consuming more, but
Yeah.
actually by consuming it with that type of equipment, you're improving your efficiency level, and that intensity of footprint has probably decreased in that scenario.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, great that
Yeah.
you're looking at tracking all that as well.
Yeah, our air conditioning is on setback as well. So at 6 p.m. every day, we've got like an AI smart manager system on our air conditioning. So it sets back our thermostats in the offices and lab to preset baseline temperatures. So I think it's 20 degrees Celsius with a low fan speed in the lab to keep it cool, and in the office it goes back to like 21 degrees and a fan speed of 1. So people during the day, especially in winter, they ramp up the temperature to 25 degrees.
Right.
It sets it back overnight, so we're not overly consuming electricity through the air conditioning system.
Yeah.
And then one of the other things is around procurement. So the two kind of industry standards for energy efficient scientific equipment are the ACT and Energy Star labels. So we're prioritizing procurement of any scientific equipment with those energy efficient labels
Brilliant.
as a first priority. So where it's practical and we can afford to do it, we'll invest our money in energy efficient scientific equipment, and prioritize that as a first option as well. So
Fantastic.
yeah, we've done quite a lot in the space.
Yeah, I love it.